In my opinion, the worst thing about this new age of conspiracism is that it's the dumbest conspiracies that are making a comeback. At least the crazy ones about Jewish capitalist lizard men using space lasers to cause wildfires and buy up all the property after the resulting economic downturn are so incredibly retarded that they're entertaining. But no, nowadays we're also seeing the boring old conspiracy theories that aren't even fun to indulge in Ancient Alien style. They're literally just the most low IQ shit imaginable, like the flat earth nonsense or, as is the case today, weather manipulation. Yes, weather manipulation. That is what we are talking about today. My autism just can't let this topic go in my brain, so fuck it. Let's tank the channel metrics even harder. Down to the basement, boys, let's go. This is a condensation trail, or a contrail. Contrails are a well-understood phenomenon. These cloud trails behind a plane are predominantly water, and they're formed when water vapor is expelled from the engine exhaust, coming into contact with the low ambient temperatures at high altitudes. In simpler terms, contrails are basically the same as clouds. They're evaporated water vapor collected into a visible structure. The reason they're straight is because the water is coming out of the aircraft in a line, rather than a cloud which amasses naturally. Contrails can last anywhere between a few seconds and a few hours, depending on a variety of factors like plane shape and size, the wind, the temperature. Conspiracy theorists like to call these chemtrails because they don't believe they're simply a byproduct of normal airplane travel, which is largely harmless. Oh no, there's been conspiracies about these chemtrails since the 1990s. The theories change from person to person. Some people believe the government is trying to modify the weather or block out the sun, or poison the American people, or mind control the population, or they're testing new biological or chemical weapons. Being among the wackiest of conspiracy theories, it largely died off throughout the 2000s, being relegated to the fringes of the most extreme anti-government groups, like off-the-grid preppers on the right, or the commune free-love hippies on the left. However, due to the 2020s information environment, where conspiratorial thinking is socially rewarded rather than shunned, despite most conspiracy theories being just blanket false, the chemtrails shit has made a resurgence among your rank-and-file right-winger. It's not hard to pop on social media and find some retarded boomer screaming at the fucking clouds. But it's not just chemtrails, they're actually screaming at the clouds. This is Liz Churchill, a huge right-wing conspiracy account on Twitter. There's no way this is normal. It's almost like the weather's been weaponized. Bill Gates should be investigated immediately. He's already admitted to blocking out the sun. It turns out what she's talking about is the remnants of Tropical Storm Barry. This isn't some manufactured weather event. It's something we completely knew about. Clouds just seem to hover and grow to nowhere lately. Yeah, bro, I don't know about you, but I learned about the weather cycle in grade fucking 4. Guess what happens? Water evaporates, collects in the sky as clouds, and when the clouds get too heavy, it rains. It's actually ridiculous just how fucking stupid these people have become. No, bro, it's not the libs getting triggered over you telling the real story. It's that you're a slack-jawed homunculus. When meteorologists call it unreal, you know it's not natural. No storm strengthens like this without help. Actually, hurricanes strengthen due to favorable conditions in the Atlantic all the time. It's called hurricane season. It's incredible how internet schizos don't believe meteorologists about anything until they say something that can be used to reinforce their biases. It's comical at this point. Trump, why are you allowing this? This is no different than the forced vaccine. This is physical, biological, and mental tyranny. What do you think's happening here? These are just normal clouds. There's no storm here, there's no chemtrails. These are just clouds. Oh my god, this specific account posts nothing but conspiracy slop about how all weather is faked. How does this bitch even tie her shoelaces? This tendency has spread beyond clouds to people just blanket being scared of the weather. The fog is back. If you notice an uptick in sinus issues, this is why. What, do you think you're living in a Stephen King novel? The implication here is that the water droplets in the air, highlighted by this light, aren't simply water, but in fact is the government sprinkling poison from the sky or something. Even Sargon got caught up in believing the fog was faked by the Klaus Schwab globalists or whatever. Jesus Christ, if you had told me 10 years ago that this is where Sargon would have declined to, I genuinely wouldn't have believed you. What the fuck? From floods being artificially created by humans, to geology apparently being a fake science because people found sea fossils on a mountain, what unites all of these wacko conspiracy theories is ignorance. In reality, the world's actually a pretty complicated place, and it takes education to actually understand what's going on in any one domain. A lack of education functions the same way as a lack of transparency. Even if something is transparent, if you don't know what you're looking at, you're not going to be able to understand it. In other words, everything appears to be a conspiracy when you don't know how anything works. But as you gain more knowledge, and it turns out those unknown bits do actually serve a purpose, suddenly, most conspiracies just vanish. Sometimes, people are just ignorant, and they haven't had the opportunity to learn yet. Fair enough. Nobody comes out of the womb understanding everything after all. But a lot of these people are smart enough that they could have known, but they made the choice to remain in the dark. They see a pattern in one place, where it benefits them politically or socially, and they fail to see it in another place. For example, why did none of the right-wing conspiratards post about Elon causing chemtrails constantly with his SpaceX starships? Is it because Elon is sending up those good anti-globalist chemtrails to do battle with Klaus Schwab's evil ones? Why do these people see patterns that lead them to intelligent design, but they still can't see the pattern linking apes with humans? Back in the day, most conspiracy theories were these elaborate stories that people told each other for fun, because, let's be real, most people didn't actually believe the ancient aliens shit. But nowadays, the conspiracy theories online is stuff that only schizos and people with empty lives will ever actually believe. Like, oh my god, guys, did you know that Hidden Valley Ranch has vegetable oil in it? It's not like you couldn't get that information from the fucking ingredient list, but isn't it so much more dramatic if I show you a picture of a bottle filled with oil, and then word my tweet like it's some secret truth hidden from you by the powers that be? That'll get you to click on my page, won't it? Despite how dumb this all is, true believers of this slop are making their way into actual positions of power. And no, I don't mean Marjorie Taylor Greene this time, though she is one of the worst. RFK is also a true believer in this shit, as is Doug Mastriano, a GOP senator. These people have begun to try and pass laws banning chemtrails and other operations that use technology to alter the weather, despite a 1971 law already banning the practice, as well as America being a signatory of the 1977 Environmental Modification Convention, an international agreement stopping the practice. Now, at least this insane fucking bullshit hasn't made its way up to the very top of government, right? At least not past RFK anyway?
Sir, you made it through hurricane season without a hurricane. Yeah. And so FEMA, you kept the hurricanes away.
Yeah, that was the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, telling Trump to his face that the dear leader of the United States of America has successfully used his godlike powers to keep the hurricanes away. I swear to God, these guys are one cabinet meeting away from thanking Trump for the sunrise and gravity. Here's the issue with any sort of outlandish conspiracy theory. There's always a single drop of truth in them. That drop allows believers to continue to claim the entire thing is true. It just hasn't been revealed yet, which is almost never the case. The vast majority of the time, a conspiracy theory is simply false, but a well-crafted conspiracy theory contains just a little sprinkle of truth. Nothing of any real substance. Nothing that makes the rest of the theory true, but enough to sucker stupid people into believing it. After all, the best lies are the ones that are a little bit true. So, what is true about all of this stuff? Well, starting on September 20th, 1950, the US Navy executed a secret biological warfare experiment called Operation Sea Spray. Infectious bacteria was sprayed over San Francisco over the course of a week, and 43 monitoring stations around the city recorded the impact. The data gathered from these stations determined that enough bacteria was sprayed for the entire city's population to have inhaled at least 5,000 particles each, which is above the threshold for infectivity for something like anthrax. By October 11th, 11 residents of the city had checked into the hospital with very rare infections. One of them was immunocompromised due to a recent surgery and ended up dying. The military did not alert the public or the civilian authorities of San Francisco. And by the way, this isn't a conspiracy theory. All of this came out during a Senate subcommittee on health and scientific research in 1977, where the military disclosed the existence of the tests. During the Vietnam War, Operation Popeye was a secret project carried out by the US Air Force, where American planes would seed rain clouds with lead iodide and silver iodide, with the intention of extending the monsoon season over North Vietnam, hopefully leading to more rain, which would then wash out roads and cause landslides. This operation was disclosed to the public at the end of the war, and is largely considered to be ineffective. A similar operation, Project Storm Fury, took place off the coast of Florida around the same time, though this time with the objective of weakening hurricanes. It was also ineffective. By 1996, a research paper produced for the Air Force and released to the public speculated about the future use of nanomachines to create artificial weather, but also noted that no such technology currently exists, and that all human attempts to influence the weather through cloud seeding technology have thus far failed. However, the paper estimated that it would be possible by 2025. In fact, it's the public release of this paper that kicked off the chemtrails conspiracy theory in the first place, as the pattern recognizers started to correlate contrails with the possibility of government weather control. Here's the issue though. Operation Popeye and Project Storm Fury were both failures, so as of right now, government weather control is out of the question. And while Operation Sea Spray did cause 11 infections and 1 death, the bacteria in question weren't actually sprayed from airplanes tens of thousands of feet in the air. Instead, Navy ships off the coast of San Francisco used giant hoses to spray a cloud of these particles into an already existing patch of fog that was rolling off the water and into the city. This is obviously bad, by the way, but for this operation to be carried out by a plane, it would require an order of magnitude more of the bacteria in order to achieve the same effect, as it would be significantly more spread out. In other words, Operation Sea Spray would not have been possible using chemtrails. But when you're a conspiracy theorist, all of these minor details get lost in the shuffle. These different events get mixed together, and voila, you've got the government flying around in planes, blasting the population with biotoxins or heavy metals, or controlling the weather or whatever, even though none of this shit has ever actually fucking worked when tried. Just make the story vague and spooky enough, maybe use some AI slop for good measure, and tons of boomers will believe it. No questions asked. Probably the worst part of all is how hard some of the stuff actually goes. Like, this is just some conspiratard showing basic aerosol patents and calling it proof of chemtrails. But damn, son, why do you gotta put in this ominous music? Of course, there's no shortage of clip farmers out there, taking out of context snippets of interviews, and claiming this proves everything they're saying, all the usual conspiratard shit. But something unique to chemtrails, and other weather control nuts, is their recent switchover to using geoengineering. Whenever you hear these people talk about this stuff, they say geoengineering instead of chemtrails. Now, geoengineering is a real field. It's the study of possible ways to mitigate the effects of climate change, and it's currently subdivided into two main areas of focus. The first, CO2 removal, basically just refers to reforestation efforts and carbon scrubbers. You know, projects that remove carbon from the atmosphere. The second is solar radiation modification, and this is what the conspiracy theorists focus on. The idea is, once again, about spraying stuff into the atmosphere, but this time the purpose is to get the Earth to absorb less heat from the sun, by reflecting more of it away, in an effort to slow or stop global warming caused by excess carbon. It was inspired by volcanoes that do the same thing. The most sophisticated form of the conspiracy theory nowadays is that these efforts are not just theoretical, but they're currently in process, and their intention isn't to combat climate change, but instead is to spray the populations with deadly bacteria, or weaponize hurricanes, all the same shit as before. Most recently, Tucker Carlson hosted Dane Wigington on his show to talk about it, back on November 10th, 2025. Yes, that is how mainstreamed this brain rot has become. Wigington is fucking insane. He is one of the earliest proponents of the chemtrails shit, though he admitted plainly to Tucker that his sphere no longer calls them chemtrails because the mainstream has sufficiently astroturfed that term. Nowadays, they use the term geoengineering, and a lot of people on Twitter have followed suit.
You just said a bunch of amazing things, all of which I just want to say sound plausible to me. But let's just back up a little bit. So you're calling this geoengineering. The term...
That's a science.
The term chemtrails, you say, is a propaganda term designed to discredit people who ask sincere questions about what the hell am I looking at. So,
correct, because if they Google that term, they'll get what you got. And that's what we try to avoid. If anybody is unfamiliar with the issue and they Google that term, that's the end of their search most likely. So we try to point chess, semantics matter in this case.
Wigington has devoted the past 30 years of his life to talking about this shit, going on fringe podcasts and publications, putting out books, and frankly, he's probably delighted that the media landscape has decayed so much that he's actually considered credible by somebody relatively mainstream like Tucker. The problem is, he's wrong about everything. All of his claims have been thoroughly debunked by a wide variety of scientists. He's lost multiple lawsuits on the merits. There's just nothing fucking here, man. In a recent video, I spoke about Karl Popper, the liberal political theorist who wrote the book The Open Society and Its Enemies, a gigantic defense of liberalism from socialist and fascist critiques. That was a book that I read years ago, and it's pretty much considered the foundational liberal text. And although it's Popper's most famous work, it's not his most important. That would be his book, The Logic of Scientific Discovery, where he first outlined the concept of falsifiability. A hypothesis is falsifiable if it allows for empirical observation to contradict it. This seems obvious nowadays, but being able to put this concept into words was pretty important for rational thinking, and we have Popper to thank for it. The problem with chemtrails or geoengineering or other wacky conspiracy theories isn't that they're wacky. Wacky things can be true sometimes. It's not that they're espoused by dubious people on the fringe of their fields. Sometimes there are hidden geniuses on the fringe. And it's not that they're perpetuated in a social media ecosystem rife with falsehoods and filled with individuals who are too stupid to know why they're wrong, or they actively refuse to examine contradictory evidence. No, that's bad too. But none of this stuff is what makes these conspiracy theories false. In trying to determine what actually makes a hypothesis false, Popper coined the term pseudoscience. It's very easy for any hypothesis to use the objective-sounding language of science to make it appear more legitimate than it actually is. But the difference between science and pseudoscience is falsifiability. A scientific theory, even an incorrect one, is falsifiable. It can be tested in some legitimate way. Meanwhile, pseudoscientific theories are unfalsifiable. There is no possible objection that can be raised, which would show the theory to be wrong. In real science, it's easy to say, if X happens, then theory Y is not true. For example, if I drop a bowling ball out of a window and it doesn't fall down, then the theory of gravity is false. That is a test. You can actually go and do that test and discover for yourself if gravity is real or not. The theory of gravity is true, however, it's falsifiable because there is a hypothetical test that could prove it false if you did it, even if it actually doesn't. Popper outlined 7 basic rules for testing to determine if you're dealing with science or pseudoscience. As we go through these, I want you to notice how they relate to conspiratorial thinking. 1. It's easy to find confirmations of a theory, if you specifically look for them. 2. Confirmations of a theory should only count if there is a possibility of the test refuting the theory. 3. Every good theory is a prohibition. It forbids certain things from happening. 4. A theory that is not refutable by any event is not scientific. 5. Every genuine test is an attempt to prove the theory wrong. 6. Confirmations should not count unless the test was a genuine attempt to refute the theory. Personally, I think this one overlaps a lot with Rule 2, but what do I know? And finally, 7. Some genuinely testable theories, when found to be false, are still upheld by their admirers by appealing to some reinterpretation of the theory, or the words describing the theory, in an attempt to rescue it. This rescuing does not always mean the theory is false, but it does lower its validity. As you examine the people who uncritically believe the chemtrails nonsense, notice that they violate pretty much every single one of these rules. They always have confirmations of their view, which to be fair, most people do. Their tests, if they even do them, never have a chance of actually refuting the theory, which violates 2, 4, 5, and 6. And if they ever do debates, they almost always violate Rule 7. These people believe that the chemtrails are a part of some nefarious government plot, even though in other contexts, they support that very same government, currently headed up by Donald Trump and staffed with MAGA loyalists. Notice how during that entire Tucker interview, the two of them always say the government or the Department of Defense, never the Trump administration, or Trump himself, or Pete Hegseth as the guy in charge of said department.
So, who's doing this specifically?
Ultimately, all roads lead to those who print the money. But we know as far as the coordinating entities, certainly DOD.
If any evidence were to appear that proves the chemtrail conspiracy theory is real, these guys would tout it as proof of their claims. But there is no such evidence, and they tout the lack of evidence also as proof of their claims, saying it was all covered up by the villains of the story. They believe that anyone who confirms their theory is a brave whistleblower, speaking truth to power. However, they believe anybody who disagrees with them to be foolish, evil, or paid off. Given this set of positions, the chemtrails conspiracy theory is unfalsifiable, meaning it's impossible to disprove. There is no evidence, no set of conditions that would cause these guys to say, oh, I guess I was wrong. To contrast, good scientific theories are preferably true, but even if they're false, they're constructed in such a way that if they were false, evidence could show it. And of course, there's also just the basic Bayesian analysis. Is it more likely that the government is covering up a massive weather control program, or mind control program or whatever, requiring the compliance of millions of people across the globe, from your local weather reporter and every single commercial pilot, all the way up to the highest members of every single major government on the planet? Or is it more likely that chemtrails are just evaporated water being expelled from an engine? The former hypothesis is still possible, but you need some truly extraordinary evidence to swing the likelihood in that direction. And man, it's just not fucking there. As right-wing conspiracism has grown and, frankly, overtaken the bulk of the right, these critical thinking errors have become more and more common. Do you recall a few months ago when I spoke about the Stellar Blade censorship drama? Yeah, that was just some terminally online video game shit. Doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. But the critical thinking failure in that conversation was the exact same as the one here. The people who blamed Sony for that whole debacle, their position was unfalsifiable. Any evidence that pointed away from Sony being the culprit was written off as manufactured, or lies, or cope, or whatever. Even when the CEO of Shift Up, the developer of Stellar Blade, came out and said that Sony was not responsible, people acted like Sony were holding him at gunpoint, and there was just no evidence of it. We don't gotta relitigate that whole story again. It's nearly 2 years old at this point and nobody cares anymore. It's yesterday's culture war slop. Though if you really want to, my old videos on the topic are still up. The point is, when it comes to the right-wing conspiratards, the fake centrists who are actually just Trump supporters, and the just asking questions skeptics who only ever seem to hold that level of skepticism for the mainstream, they all suffer from the same fundamental flaw in their thinking. And it's infected them all the way down to something as inconsequential as a video game, and all the way up to something as important as real politics. And listen, if you think I'm sweeping for the left on this, no fucking way. The Marxists and anarchists suffer from the same fatal flaw. Their irrational belief in their own theories, where any evidence to the contrary is just capitalist subversion, is just as fucking stupid. What unites all of these different flavors of retard is lazy thinking. They see patterns, and they stop actually wondering why the pattern is there. Oh, there's a line in the sky coming out of an airplane. Could it be the exhaust like with your car? Or is it some grand conspiracy about evil governments and corporations trying to hurt you and your family? Well, which of these narratives makes you feel like a hero, a truth seeker? Which one of them gives you a morally justifiable quest against an obvious villain? That's the one people are going to be drawn to. Not because it's true, but because it's fun. It offers a bit more meaning to their shitty lives. And perhaps most importantly, it doesn't actually place any of the blame on them, or any of the responsibility for actually changing things. Sure, they might mightily struggle to do nothing for 30 years of their life like Wigington, but you know what? That's actually part of the appeal too. They don't have to succeed, because nothing's actually happening. They just have to fight against the villain they've invented, and it's actually better that they lose, because if they won, then something would actually have to be done about it. This is why, for example, none of these people actually latch on to climate change topics. In fact, they overwhelmingly disbelieve in climate change entirely, despite it being a similar thing to the chemtrails. Modern machines expelling gases into the air that poisons the atmosphere and lowers people's quality of health. Because unlike with the chemtrails, there's something the average person can actually do to help out climate change, if only a little bit. Turn off your fucking car, and nobody actually wants to do that. It's this type of conspiratorial mindset, with all of its flaws, that explains pretty much every major right-wing or right-coded event over the past 5 years. For each one, they have an idea that goes against the mainstream. Okay, fair enough, but that hypothesis is always pseudoscientific. It's always unfalsifiable. There's no test you can perform, no evidence you can present that will ever make them change their minds. And hell, I lost friends over this incredibly destructive mindset. Think back to how the rightoids reacted to Trump losing 2020 and the January 6th riot, or the COVID lockdowns and the vaccine, or the Ukraine war and Russian aggression and subversion, or the Epstein files, or something as tiny as a video game culture war. Each time, it's the same bullshit. An unfalsifiable hypothesis, where all evidence against their position is faked or rigged, and all evidence for their position is based and true. Any mistakes with their prior predictions are ignored or explained away. All arguments against them are by default false. All arguments for them are by default true, despite any contradictions with previously held positions. These are not rational people. The right has abandoned objective reality.